Well, well, well. Right back at it. Been a bit of time in between our last little convo. Summer. Basically, I don't work on this thing in the summer. Got real no reason for it. I do use it to tow the trailers around in the summer, which is very handy. The only other thing I did through the summer was I gave it a little touch-up paint, a little here and there. Also made some modifications to the bucket. I put it on a pivot. So to start the process of dump bucket, some of you may or may not know, this was entered into Princess Auto's Ultimate Figure It Outer. Came in the top 20. Got disqualified because I offered to give away money. If I had won, wanted to give $1,000 away to one lucky subscriber, and they deemed that as buying votes. But it is what it is. But they do still want it to be on display at the local Princess Auto coming up March 2nd, actually. If anybody's interested in coming, March 2nd at the Princess Auto in Barrie. Be there around noon and most of the day after that. I'm just going to have this thing on display, help promote their Ultimate Figure It Outer contest, which will be kind of cool. So I figure, why not clean the thing up and do a little bit more to it. Got a couple of maintenance issues. This tire went flat again, so there must be something sharp in the rim that's puncturing the tubes, because it's just like the third tube I put in it, so I will have to find that. I also, maintenance-wise, going to clean up some of the rusty areas, paint some of the rusty areas, etc., etc. And one big thing I want to do, more of an upgrade than a maintenance, is I have a 24 volt linear actuator out of a recliner or something that was given to me, and I think it will fit nicely under here, mounting the bottom of it somewhere about here and the top coming up to approximately here, potentially even here. I don't know. I think I'm going to try and utilize the holes and come from about halfway, just to get a little bit of mechanical advantage, and then push up, because you can see at the angle it goes, it doesn't need a lot of travel. And I think also by pivoting the bucket part way, I can use some of the weight of the bucket. So from everything here back is negative weight, which will help with lowering. One big problem though is this thing is bent. So first things first, I'm going to try and take it apart, try and straighten it out as best as possible, because right now it does the weeble wobbles real bad. Another big advantage to this particular actuator, like most, but this one has it where the homemade jobby I did up here does not, is limit switches. I had to put those in. This one here has limit switches built right into it, so I can relocate those. They just go off of this, I think this is UHMW, just goes off of that. It has a clicker on both ends, and that's what stops it. So I should be able to relocate those to the exact height and cut the thing down to exactly what I need. But all that's null and void if I can't get it straightened out. So I'm gonna try that. Yeah, she's bent quite a bit. See what we can do about that. Looks like it's kind of one area. All right, couple minutes on the vise, yanking and wonking and wibbly wobbling. It's pretty much straight as I'm gonna get it. And straighten the casing out too. It was a little bent. It's still a little bent, but it don't really matter that much. It's just like a protector and gives us a little something to ride in, but nothing too major. This is gonna get its rigidity from the bucket, and then this here gets its mounting from the slotted pin. So, all right, all straightened out. Seems to be running smooth. Before I was walking like a three-legged dog. Now it's just got a tiny little bit of wobble. Nothing at all, nothing to worry about. And you see when it gets to the limit switch, it just stops. The way they do that, the limit switches are wired thus so that when this one triggers, the motor can only run the direction reverse. And when that one triggers, it can only run reverse as well. It's a pretty simple thing where you don't need any electronics to do it. You can just daisy chain the switches together. Versus the way I did mine, physically shuts off one of the relays to control it. A lot more complicated, but just the way I did it. Also, when you do it this way, all your current runs through the switch as well, versus my way, no current runs through the switch, nothing at all, except for the 0.01 amp that it takes to trigger the relay. This one's taking all of the current and running it through, but it's not bad. It's just the way it is. Oh boy, when I get to mocking stuff up, it gets real sketchy. Just got some wood in here holding the back in. What I did was on those bars, I just bent them at a 90, approximately where I think they should be. I think that's going to be just about right. I thought that they would reach right out to the holes in the wheelbarrow, but it turns out they don't. And just while I'm mocking it up, I don't want to drill anything or weld anything, just to make sure. Not sure if this is even going to work. So what I did was I just added a piece of wood. So I'm going to put the barrel back on and just screw a couple of wood screws in there to hold it, just like I say, temporary, make sure everything works. And then we'll go from there. If it works, and make up a nice metal bracket from there. I think I am going to have to cut this down. I'm going to have to play with it and see what the length is like. And also finding the position for the end of it. I have to find that out. The farther away I get the end, I think the more mechanical advantage I get, considering this is the pivot point so close. Doesn't have a lot of mechanical advantage, which is kind of crappy. Or, I don't know. Perhaps it really, I guess, should be the other way, where the end of it is down on that end, for the mechanical advantage part of it. But we'll see. If this works and has enough power to dump the, I guess probably about 100 pounds, maybe 100 and a half, a typical wheelbarrow load full. And like I said, we do have a little bit of leverage because of the bucket hanging past the pivot. Not a drastic amount though, but hopefully enough. We'll get this all screwed in there and see how it works, and then go from there. All right, here goes nothing. Just shut it off because its travel is, as you can see, it can go a lot farther than what's needed. That's about it there. Excuse me. It seemed to work pretty good. I mean, it looks cool, this rig. And if I cut it down to about there, you notice looking down about, I get it real close, that looks like it would drop down right in behind that wheel, or that axle, I should say. Now that being said, it is currently sitting higher in the axle, so it could stay. I just had to remove the electronics box. But I've been wanting to move it anyways. I'm wanting to put the electronics right up in the corner. Right up in the corner. Something about like that. So that it's all accessible from underneath and out of the way. So that's something I'm going to consider doing as well in the near future. And then down is the same kind of way. Just reverse the polarity. And down does the same thing. There's a gap here which happens to be approximately the same amount as the wood, which is just kind of ironic and novelty all at the same time. It means that it's going to fit pretty good. And so I was seeing it's sitting right on the axle. I just raised it the same height back there. But if it was cut, so if it was cut and then everything was shifted a little bit, because you see there's a lot behind as well that's not being used, then that would help. Actually, I wonder if I move that farther forward to get it closer to the end, that'd get more mechanical advantage. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that right now. Okay, so I just moved that farther forwards, and as you can see, we're actually at the end of the travel here now. I know there's more in there that you can see, there's more travel, but that's where the limit switch is. I can look at making that limit switch closer, which I probably will do. So let's see how it works now. See if with a little bit more mechanical advantage. Didn't get my clamp tight enough. Just pushing the clamp. Oh, not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. I like it. Okie dokie, got a longer lead to reach over to the positive. This is down, but you can see the speed difference. 24 should be twice as fast. That's pretty quick. That extra little raise up it does at the end is the transition on the angle. You can see there's a lot of slop in this whole thing because that's held together with shoelaces and bubble gum. And there's this bit of slop too that I'm not too terribly sure about. I don't think it matters because that's on the downward. Once this is rigidly mounted here, this will be the first mount I do. I'll make a proper metal bar, bolt it in good. I think this one's gonna get more than just the 2. It'll have 4, I think. And maybe even a plate on top because this is pretty flimsy itself. And then once that one's in, then I will make that one permanent. I'll probably just use the same jig for the whole testing because there's a little bit of loss in there, but not too much. Not as much as on the top part. And this will just come down with, I'm gonna do 3 pieces of plate straight down and onto this bar. Or maybe onto its own plate and then bolt it in. That's probably what I'll do. Because then I can make it on the bench and bring it over a little easier. Well, I think that's pretty productive for tonight. Next bit will be chopping these up a little bit more permanently and then to just the bending. Weld them to a solid piece of steel. Fairly hefty piece that runs just the span of the box itself. And figure this height out, make sure that's perfect. Because I definitely want that to be spot on. So I might cut these a little shorter still. I think we're gonna be close, but I might cut those off at right at, you know, an inch short or whatever, and then play with this height to make it match. It's probably my best bet. That's all for tonight. Okay, I lied, I'm still out here. Went inside to check on the wifey and she's still not home yet, so got a couple more minutes to play. I just pulled this cover off thinking, I wonder why there's a cover. I wonder why it's serviceable. And sure enough, there's adjustment screws on the bloody, see that's how they do that thing I was telling you. See there's a diode in there, so power can only go one direction. So whenever the button's pressed, it can't go that direction anymore. But anyways, there's the adjustable. You wanna adjust the end stops? Probably just loosen this sucker off. and then slide it. Maybe take it right out. I think we take it right out. And then keep the camera in frame here. Oh, that was almost history. Adjustable. Look at that. I'm gonna adjust the top end stop now too, so I don't have to worry about breaking it. All right, I got this thing in where I think it's gonna be pretty permanent. I can cut this down quite a bit, which I might. One thing that's leery about cutting this down is there's at the end of the Acme thread here is a turn down portion that fits into this plastic to act like a bushing, and I'm not too sure how I'm going to do that to get it turned down that same way. I have a couple of acquaintances that have machine shop and access to like a proper lathe. I might see about going that route. Excuse me, getting over a cold here. That's why I cough it so much. But anyways, nevertheless, I've got this tacked together here. Essentially, just a piece of plate running across the two bolt holes of the barrel, and I ended up cutting down. Those are the ones that I had originally bent, and I just ended up cutting them down to the height to give just a little bit of clearance here, and then I just have tacked them on here now. This is still a little hocus pocus. I added a third clamp in as a backstop for that, which seems to have made it a little more sturdy, but it seems to be working pretty good if I don't break the place. Red is go, so we go up with it. It's going up quite nicely. I adjusted it, the limits, and then down as well. And down limit is good, and now that it's all somewhat rigid, there is no flex there anymore. It sucks that right down the way it should be, nice and tight and flat, just like I planned. So if I was to cut, wow, if I was to cut this down, it would just have to be cut down to about there, which would be the back of the batteries, and then I could put the electronics back in here. That's in the air right now. I'm not too sure. I'm probably going to get the rest of this mounted permanently, which I think there is pretty good. Judging by the gap that's there, I can probably come forward on this just a little bit, bring this another inch or two forward, and it would tighten that gap up right there, and give a little more angle there. The starting initial angle here is really helping to get the bucket going. When this was down low and parallel, it exerted a lot of force just to get the bucket to start tipping, just to bring that past horizontal. With it on it, starting on an angle, it seems to have a lot more power. What I'm going to do now that it's all, tacked in here fairly decently, I'm going to lower it. I'm going to fill a bucket with some weight and see what it will lift. I have some big mumbo jumbo batteries I might put in there, and I also have just some bricks. I'm going to start with the bricks and see how much it seems to be able to lift. I pushed on it in my hand. It feels pretty strong. It feels really strong actually, but I'm gonna probably lay those batteries just on the top side and see if it'll even budge. Okay, so just for reference, these two Mamba Jambas total up to be just over 120 pounds, and I did zero that scale out beforehand. Fair bit of weight. Makes it a little tippy up there. And static weight I'm not worried about, because the static weight's being held up by these bars when this is flush. So it could be loaded with 700 pounds of weight or whatever it would take with very minimal effort to any of the electronics. Let's see if this will even lift it. lifting it. I don't want to go too far. I don't want those sliding out. That's what I'm talking about. Alright, that was on 12. Let's try it on 24. Cool. I'm not going to go any farther for it tipping, but that's, as you can see, that's going crazy good. That noise at the end was this shifting. When I started, that block was level with the frame. So obviously that's not holding up too much. So now I'll just work at getting this brought as far forward. The more forward it is, the stronger it is. If this was pushing straight up, it would be the strongest possible. We're not losing anything at the angles. And like I said, I bring that up a couple of inches just to make that gap next to nothing, which will make it the strongest it can be. It'll also consequently raise that up, which as long as I don't come above here, I'm fine, which there is a lot of room. And the higher up that is, more likely I am to be able to put the electronics back in here. But like I said, I think I want to move those somewhere accessible. But nevertheless, we will figure that out as we go. So that's another good progress for tonight. Next time I will make that all welded in, build a nice little bracket and or bolt it in, I guess. I'm gonna build a bracket and then just bolt it to the frame. Like a lot of the other stuff on this thing, just bolt it in for serviceability. But all in all, that went pretty good. Wires aren't even warm at all. Motor's cold. So I think it's good. I think we're doing a good job. And I'm happy that this is solid. I was worried about that. Because one thing, I use these holes here to clamp this down after I put the pivot in. Because this thing would just the whole time you were driving. It was annoying. So I wanted to make that a little quieter. And I'm glad this is pulled down enough. Maybe go a little more still, but that's the tweaking stuff, and I'll have to do that on those limit switches. But for now, that's pretty good. Next up is to make a bracket. This is the little bracket I made up for the back end of the thing. Plenty strong, I do believe. It's just high enough off the ground so that the actuator can lay parallel, even though we're laying at an angle. I figured might as well. 3 pieces, one on the outs, one on the end. I'll get it bolted in or clamped in to find out exactly where it's going over there, and then we'll drill the holes out. I tapped it so that the bolts can come in from the underside. That way, when the actuator is fully covering this, it's easy enough to add the to take this on and off. And those are just 2 1/4-20s, which I think will be more than enough clamping power. And if anything is to happen with those, I'll just add a couple of more, or maybe go up to 5/16. But I think this will be fine. There it is installed. Give it a quick coat of paint. And same thing with this, painted a little bit. Cut these ends off, welded some nuts in there so that this can actually lock in, where before it was just hanging out enough that it couldn't slide out with the bucket in. I had just never gotten around to finishing that. Put a few more beads on this thing as well, just to make it a little stronger. A little bit along the back. Terrible there. That's on the bottom though, nobody cares. But yep, plenty strong here. So next step is going to be to just start pulling things off. I'm gonna pull it right down to the frame and clean and paint things. You see I got a little happy with the spray can. Was just going about it, and I thought, man, I should do that to everything. So I'm gonna pull all the chains off, axles out, bushings out, pull all these ones off, sandblast those, etch and paint them. Same thing with the axles, etch and paint those. Anything that hasn't been painted, paint, anything that's not fixed down, like the middle bracket here, I'm gonna get those all fixed down. Anything that's held with a C-clamp is gonna get removed and figured out. All this area up here, wire wheeled and painted. Motors are gonna come off for that as well. And then I'm going to also look at relocating the batteries and stuff. Not sure if I'll make it that far before the competition thingy, which is March. But I'll be close. So just see what I can get going here for all this. But mainly I want to get it looking nice. It looks a lot better when it's got a little bit of paint on it than when it looks like that. So those have just never been painted. But bracket and dump bucket turned out good, and it just gets wired in the same way as the plow lift, so up and down on the remote, so that's easy enough. Went ahead and moved the electronics. Not sure if it's going to permanently stay this way or not, but I kind of like the positioning of it. It's still below the upper deck, so I can put something along the upper deck. If there was a cover on the deck, this is still all accessible through the front, no problem. It's slightly on the side, and still back in there enough it's not going to get bumped or anything like that. Power cord runs along the side now, which I think is fine, and it will reach if the batteries are turned around, I think. I don't know, I'll check that. All these cables do reach, no problem, because they're all right here. Green, yellow, and blue. Cut the tape on the blue one, but close enough. I just basically used some all thread and threaded it in, and then put some nuts on it so it stands off. It's off the motor to keep the heat off, let the airflow come through. Straight through, it's still accessible, no problem. Even right straight on for charging. That's pretty good. Move that, because I'm not going to get time to cut this down, I don't think, so I needed to get the box moved. And I think this will do it. And I figured I needed to move the box before cleaning up and painting everything, because it would be drilling holes and welding stuff on. Sure enough, I did, so I think it'll be alright. But that's the new electronic location. And I was going to butt it right up tight here, but I actually am going to be putting lights on it, and they're going to be telescopic, so I needed some room in here to access that for the telescopic portion. I got a few ideas I'm going to work out for that, but that's for another time. But I think I like it. I just got to make sure that the cables will reach. Okay, so it didn't reach. To move the power plug to that side, so everything comes out that side now, which is probably how I should have done it to begin with. But in the beginning, I had batteries box motors, so it made sense to do it that way. Also, going back in time, I would have not put these here. I would have put them on top. Maybe someday I'll get another box and redo it all. But the boxes are not really that cheap. I think they're like $40 or something, so I will make this one work until I get it all figured out, and I'll just plug holes with tape for now. But that's on that side now, so now everything will reach, because obviously the power plug can reach to there. I tried these batteries in all kinds of orientations, but I would have had to make the wires longer, which is not a big deal either. I just didn't have any heavy enough gauge wire to make them longer, so this is what we get for now. And it's still going to get good position. Plus, I think it makes sense to have all the wires come out that way if this is where the box is going to stay, which I think it is. I like it there. Seems to be a good spot for it for me.